the presentation. Okay, Claire.
Great, thank you. I was just getting messages popping up all over the place then. So good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for that introduction. You're absolutely right. Speaking about mental ill health and the suicide rate in construction is extraordinarily high, and that's an area that you know we're doing some work because it is such a huge problem. But it's a problem that affects, you know, everybody. Mental ill health is completely non-discriminatory, and you know it does affect everybody across all sectors and industries, all you know types of people from all kinds of groups and communities. And you know I hope that tonight's session will have some real value for everyone. So today I'm going to be talking about resilience. I'll open the slides up in just a second. Resilience is, I believe, one of the real foundations for good mental health and well-being. And I believe very strongly that there's real value in everybody putting some time and energy into how they can develop their own resilience, because even those of us that don't identify as having any form of mental illness or don't experience any symptoms of mental ill health, if they invest that time and energy into developing resilience, and that's a very strong protective factor for future mental health and well-being. So I hope you'll all find some value in this evening's presentation. So I'm going to share my slides now. Hopefully you can all see those.
Yep, that's great.
Good. Thank you. So just a quick introduction about me, and then we'll dive into the session content. Clearly, my name's Claire. I'm the founder and CEO of Mental Health in Business. We set the business up about 4.5 years ago, and we work with businesses and organisations across all sectors to help them to create psychologically safe and healthy workplaces. And we do that through training, education and support. We do a lot of work around mental health first aid training, but by no means is that all that we do. We've got a wide range of different trainings and education programs and support packages that we provide to businesses of all sizes. My background is in the insurance industry, so I was an insurance broker for about 25 years and ran my own business for most of that time. So I started my first insurance brokerage when I was just 20 and didn't ever imagine doing anything other than running my own insurance business. I had a lot of success. I built a very successful business. Really enjoyed that, really loved the business and loved being an owner and director of my own business. And of course, it came with a lot of stress, as these things do. I had a breakdown about 7 or 8 years ago, and that was my first experience of mental illness, mental ill health. Prior to that time, I hadn't had any experiences myself. And as far as I knew, the people that I was close to around me also hadn't. So going through that experience was really eye-opening experience for me. And it really opened my eyes to my own vulnerability. And it also opened my eyes to the experience that people around me must have been, some of them must have been having. So it made me start to become very passionate about mental health and well-being, and particularly how mental health and well-being was being addressed within the workplace. Because when I had my breakdown, there just wasn't any support to me. So I, at the time, was the managing director of a large broking business. I'd sold my own business a few years earlier, and I was the MD of another business, and had you know pretty catastrophic breakdown. I was very ill, and there just wasn't any support, and that really got me interested in workplace mental health and well-being. So I took some time out of the industry and I retrained, and then I came back into the industry a couple of years later with the intention of bringing everything that I had learned and my qualifications in mental health and well-being back into the insurance industry, with the intention of just doing it better, really, in my own business. So I reinvested in another brokerage. But then very sadly, I lost my partner to suicide a year later. And that was really the catalyst for me to begin to think about what I wanted to do with my future. And so later on that year, I set this business up. And ever since, we've been working with businesses to help them to do it better, to help them to create workplaces that are safe and healthy for everyone. So my contact details are on the next slide. I always share them. When you're very welcome to have them and to get in touch with me. When I do a session like this, of course, we're talking about mental health. It has the potential to touch on personal lived experiences that any of you may have had. And if there is anything that comes up during the course of the session for you that you don't want to ask about or speak about in the session, then you're very welcome to get in contact by email outside of the session, and I'll be glad to have a conversation with you or to help if I can in any way. I do like to keep these sessions a little bit interactive, so you're not just going to listen to me talking at you for the whole time. There'll be a couple of opportunities where I'm going to ask a question to all of you, and the questions that I ask are not designed to be difficult or to elicit traumatic responses or anything like that. They're quite generic questions, and I would love you to respond to those questions and to use the chat box in order to do that. So when I ask a question, if you're happy to respond, just pop a response into the chat box, and I will pick out some of those responses and speak to them. So the next slide is the session objectives. So the aims of the session are to explain the relationship between resilience and mental health, to help attendees to identify factors that undermine resilience building, to help attendees to learn to understand and develop resilient behaviour, and to explain the 10 key things that you can do to develop your resilience. So I hope that there'll be some value for everybody in the session. As I said earlier, there's real value even for those of us that don't identify as experiencing any mental ill health. There's real value in investing into mental health and well-being. So there are lots of challenges facing our mental health and well-being. We are living not just during a global physical health crisis, but also during a mental health pandemic. Depression is one of the most significant mental health concerns of our time. And before the pandemic began, suicide was acknowledged globally as a very significant public health concern. So much so that there is, as I'm sure some of you will be aware, there is a global suicide prevention plan in place, and in any geographical area in the UK there will be a local suicide prevention plan in place. Such is the size of the problem. So the mental health is defined by the World Health Organization as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes their own potential, can work productively and fruitfully, can cope with the normal stresses of life, and is able to make a contribution to their community. So that's quite a broad definition. Nowhere in that definition does it talk about an absence of symptoms of mental ill health. It's really talking about people being resilient enough that they can cope with the normal stresses of life and generally be well and do the things that they want to do. It is normal that we should experience ups and downs in life. It goes with the territory of being a human being. pandemics aside, we all experience challenges in our lives, whether that's physical illness, bereavement, work stress, and lots of other things. If we're going to cope well with all of those different challenges that come our way, then we need to develop our resilience, and that in turn will improve our mental well-being. So I said I was going to ask a couple of questions. Don't worry, they're not, I don't think they're very taxing questions. The first one that I'd like to ask you is quite simply, what does the word resilience mean to you? So what does the word resilience mean to you? And I would love you to just drop a word or two into the chat box in response, and I'll just pick some of those out. So while you're doing that, I'll just tell you a little bit more about the qualifications that I achieved when I went back into to retrain following my breakdown. So I'm now a suicide prevention associate tutor with SFA and MHFA England. I'm also an adult mental health first aid instructor and a youth mental health first aid instructor. So it's really great to be able to deliver all of those really important trainings. So that was a nice little gap filler there while you got some responses in there. So thank you. So, okay, we've got the ability to bounce back from adversity, strength, the ability to cope with a given situation, bounce back ability. I like that one. Thank you. Being able to bounce back or recover, and picking ourselves back up and carry on, and also how you can adapt. Yeah, great responses there. Thank you. So, you know, resilience will mean slightly different things to all of us, and that kind of depends on our lived experiences. But fundamentally, what we're talking about when we think about resilience is the individual capacity to cope with adversity. And somebody mentioned being able to adapt, and I think being able to adapt is a really fundamental part of that. The most resilient people that I've ever met are those who are able to come through a situation or a time that's been difficult, to learn from it, and then to adapt or change as a result of it. So I think that piece around adaptation is really, really important. The word resilience comes from the Latin resilio, which means to bounce back or to recoil. And I actually think it's more than bouncing back. Bouncing back implies going back to the same as we were before. And I think that resilience is more than that. You know, we bounce back and then we move forward, we grow, we improve, we get stronger. So I think it's a little bit more than just bouncing back. The term resilience has been used for many decades to describe the way that individuals respond to stress. And as I said, you know, I think resilience is really the bedrock of positive mental health. And resilience is one of the subjects that's been studied by positive psychologists from around the late 1990s. Positive psychology focuses on identifying and building on your strengths and your virtues, i.e. the things that are good about you or right with you, rather than focusing on your weaknesses or deficits, which some modes of psychology do. Resilience can help you overcome adversity and find ways of creating a better life. So before we start looking at how we can develop resilience, we're going to have a look first at some of the things that can get in the way of us developing resilience, because there's a real important piece here around self-awareness. You know, as individuals, we all need to know what's the baseline that we are starting from, and what might be the barriers to our growth, what might be the barriers to us developing our resilience. And there are some attitudes or some ways of thinking that most of us will experience from time to time, some of us more than others, and those ways of thinking, those attitudes really can be a huge barrier to resilience building. So it's not the end of the world if we recognize that these attitudes or these ways of thinking are things that we sometimes experience. But it's good to have that self-awareness, because then we can recognize when that happens and challenge those ways of thinking, or just take a step back and question whether what we're thinking is really correct or really true. So there's just a few that I want to share with you. So what gets in the way? What are the attitudes that might be a barrier to us developing resilience? So the first one is, it's not my fault. So this is where a person feels like a victim of whatever circumstances they have experienced. Now, just to add a disclaimer here, to say the point of this particular discussion is not to invalidate a person's experience or to blame a victim in any way, but it's simply to say that if a person holds on tightly to the identity of victim, it makes it very difficult for them to move on, to move forward from whatever has happened. So, just important to recognize if that might be going on. The next one is, I'll never get over it. So this is where a person feels that they are somehow broken by whatever they have experienced. And if they don't see the opportunity to put themselves back together, to rebuild from whatever has happened, then they are unlikely to be able to do it. So the next one is, I can't stand it. So some people believe that they have a low tolerance for discomfort, whether that's boredom, negative feelings, setbacks, hard work, frustration, any of those kind of difficult feelings and emotions. And because they have that perception of themselves, they give up easily. So as soon as things get difficult, they believe that they can't cope with it, and so they give up. And so it's kind of a self-prophesizing situation, really. So the next one is, why me? People will often ask this question when they have experienced a traumatic event. It implies that they should somehow be immune to difficult things happening. So a better question would be, why not me? Which states the truth, which is that no one is exempt from experiencing the possibility of adversity. And when it comes to mental health, mental ill health, certainly nobody is immune to experiences of mental ill health. So the last one is, I'm a failure. So this is a common self-devaluation belief. So put simply, in simple terms, when we describe ourselves as a failure, when something has gone wrong and we describe ourselves as a failure, we are labeling ourselves as a whole being as a failure, instead of identifying that we have failed at something. And that's not right. The thing, whatever it is, even if it's something very significant like our marriage or our career or a business venture, could be any of those really major things, they don't represent all that we are. It's just a thing that we've done. It's just a part of our life. Even if it's something very fundamental like a marriage, it still doesn't represent all that we are as a person. So, it's not true to label oneself as a failure. It's far better to, be able to identify that something has failed. We have failed at something. Something has gone wrong, rather than labeling ourselves in that way. Because if we see ourselves in that way, then that's really going to get in the way of us achieving the things that we want to achieve, and of us developing resilience, which is obviously the key thing that we're looking at tonight. So I'm going to put another question to you in just a moment. So before we start talking about how we can develop resilience, I just want to think about, so I want you all to think about somebody that you know that is resilient. So we'll all have, maybe you're resilient, but we'll all have somebody that we know. Maybe it's a friend or a work colleague who is a resilient person, and they always seem to be able to bounce back and pick themselves up and dust themselves off when things go wrong. And what I'd like you to think about is those resilient people, or that resilient person that you're thinking about now. What resilient behaviours do you think they model? So are there any things that they do, or ways that they behave, behaviours that they have, that you think are resilient behaviours? So what are some of the things that resilient people do? And again, I'm going to ask you to put any thoughts that you have into the chat box, please. Thank you. Let's see if they come in as quick as last time. There were some great responses last time. They are coming in quickly. Brilliant. So they're always positive in life. They've got a good education, good time and people skills. Yeah, great. They don't take things personally. They show perseverance. They don't dwell on the negatives. They see the big picture. Some great suggestions. Really good. Any other ideas? They talk to their friends and colleagues. Yeah, absolutely. Being able to communicate their feelings and have people that they can talk with, really key. They see the positives and advantages to move forward, even in negative situations. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm guessing that some of you may possibly be old enough to remember a film and a book called Pollyanna, which was about a little girl who had a terrible life and was sent eventually. I think her parents died, and eventually she was sent to live with this grumpy old aunt. And the kind of the whole story about this little girl was that she saw the positive in absolutely everything. So that's become my nickname. So ever since I've been at school, it's become a nickname, because it's my kind of one of my most resilient qualities, I think, was I'll always look for the positive in absolutely everything. So just a couple more that came in there. So realistic, and they exercise and have healthy diet. Yeah, some really good suggestions there. Thank you. So let me share some of my thoughts with you in terms of some of the resilient behaviours. So the first one is self-awareness. So self-awareness is really essential because it helps us to see ourselves clearly and thoroughly. When we are self-aware, we are able to keep ourselves accountable for our actions because we're seeing ourselves in a true light. And if we've got a good level of self-awareness, then, you know, again, like I said at the beginning, we know what that baseline is, we know where we're starting from, and so we are more likely to achieve the things that we want to do in sort of personal development and that kind of thing. The next one is optimistic, and I think that really ties into some of the comments that you shared in the chat box. So when obstacles arise, as they invariably do for all of us, an optimist will think, how can I overcome this? What is the solution to this? Rather than, oh, why did this happen to me? So their energy is focused on the positive, that, you know, they're looking forward, the energy is going in the right way. And that means that they've got the energy and the headspace and the momentum to be resilient and to push through whatever they need to overcome in order to achieve whatever it is that they want to achieve. So the next one is realistic. Being able to see the world and any situations that you are facing in a realistic way is really, really important. When we are able to be realistic, then we can make concise, clear decisions about what to do. it's nice if it's balanced with a little bit of optimism as well. You know, if we're always realistic and pragmatic, then we might not necessarily strive for things in the same way. So it's nice if it's balanced with a little bit of optimism too. The next one is keeping calm. So the ability to stay calm in difficult circumstances is really invaluable. Being calm means that we can face challenges, and even really difficult situations, we can still make thoughtful decisions on what needs to happen next. So we don't lose our heads. We can think clearly about what's going on and what we need to do next and make decisions rationally. So just a couple more. So the next one is empathy. Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. When a resilient person can also show empathy to others, to those around them, then they're going to have the ability to better understand how a situation might impact on others and not just themselves. And that's really important, because then any decisions that they make, and this is particularly important for leaders, I'm sure we probably can all identify leaders, whether that's world leaders or leaders in organizations that lack empathy, and therefore they don't make decisions that take the feelings of others into account. But a good leader, a compassionate leader, will have empathy and will be able to make calm, clear-headed decisions while also keeping the thoughts and feelings of others in mind as well. So the next one is self-control. So when you are resilient, self-control helps us to take control over ourselves and our actions. So again, it ties in with self-awareness, really. Self-awareness and self-control really go hand in hand. The difference being, you know, we're thinking about not just being aware of how we feel, not just being aware of how we respond to certain situations, but also being able to control our responses. So there are always going to be situations that happen that are outside of our control, but we're always able to, or we should be able to, control how we respond. That is in our control. So being able to control our actions means that we're able to be completely accountable as well. So the last one in terms of the resilient behaviours is motivation, or being motivated. Without the drive to respond in a certain way, or the impetus or the drive to achieve certain accomplishments, we just wouldn't have the stamina or the energy or the strength to push through those difficult experiences when they happen. So being motivated allows us to seek and strive for the difficult things in life. You know, if we didn't have any motivation, then we might not try so much to overcome those really difficult experiences that we all will encounter sometimes in our lives. So I'm just going to have a drink of my tea. I've been presenting a lot this week and my voice is sort of this close to disappearing. So let me just grab a drink of tea. So, okay, we're going to look next at the 10 key things that you can do to develop your resilience. And this is just really fundamental stuff. This is within the reach of absolutely all of us. So hopefully there's something here for everyone. The good news is you don't have to invite adversity into your life in order to develop resilience. You know, we could all use more resilience, and the things that I'm going to share with you really are within reach of everyone. So the first one is to look for our strengths. So identifying the strengths that we have as individuals and seeing how those strengths have helped us to deal with previous adversity can help to show us that actually we have demonstrated resilience in the past, and we have put resilience into practice in the past, and that can be quite a revelation when we actually look for evidence of as having been resilient in the past. And so that kind of leads into the next one, really. When you're thinking about your own resilience, it may be that you'll look back at really difficult challenges that you've overcome, and that's a great place to start in looking for your strengths. You might be able to remember or recall a particularly challenging time or a particularly challenging event that you've dealt with, and then within that look for the strengths that you demonstrated. But we don't need to just be looking at those big events. We can find evidence of our resilience in our daily lives. We all juggle lots and lots of responsibilities every day, and particularly I think for many of us through the pandemic, many of us have been working from home, some of us have been homeschooling children, and really trying to juggle those different responsibilities, and that takes resilience. We've been demonstrating resilience day in, day out, just by all of those little day-to-day things that we do. So reminding yourself of that on a daily basis and acknowledging your dedication and perseverance and discipline and problem solving skills is really, really important. So the next one is self-acceptance. So we are all individual, amazing, whole people. We are the sum of all of our parts. We're not just a job title or a role that we fulfill in our personal lives, or a parent or a partner or a spouse or a condition. We are whole people, and self-acceptance means that we don't rate ourselves on the success or the failure of the things that we do. And it's not based on favorable conditions being present in our life in order to validate our self-worth. Self-acceptance is the acknowledgement that we are fallible, imperfect, complex people and beings whose self-worth remains constant, whatever the circumstances of our lives. So self-acceptance is so important, and an area that a lot of people do struggle. One of the really, I think, powerful ways to start developing self-acceptance is to start journaling. So some of those things that I've just been talking about, really acknowledging the things that we do and the things that we achieve, and actually journaling, that can be a great way that we can start to really identify those skills and those strengths and that resilience that we have demonstrated. And also we can identify the areas that we perceive as our less strong areas, and within that there's a whole piece around accepting that, accepting ourselves for who we are, being a little bit kinder to ourselves. The next one is keeping things in perspective. So this means not jumping to negative conclusions every time there is a challenge, and not assuming that things will go a certain way just because they have before. When a situation happens, when we encounter a difficult experience, just taking a step back for a minute or two and taking time to appraise the reality of the situation rather than letting it get blown out of proportion. It's a really good way of just keeping things in perspective. So the next one is reviewing past adversities. Now, we've all had them, whether they're big or small, and we should be seeing those past adversities as opportunities for learning and opportunities for growth. So think about and discuss with other people if you get the chance. If you've had a difficult situation, how did you deal with it? What happened? How did you deal with it? What lessons did you learn? Even if it seems like you didn't do very well, acknowledge that you did do the best that you could do with the knowledge that you had at the time. So just a few more. The next one, envisage future adversities. Now, this can seem a little bit pessimistic or a little bit negative, but I like to think of it, especially coming from a background of insurance and risk management, I like to think of it as a form of risk management. By envisaging the potential future adversities, the things that could happen, we can start to consider whether we have the resources that we need in order to cope with what may come our way in the future. And that allows us to prepare emotionally for the emotions that we might experience, the feelings that we might experience. And it also allows us to think about what resources do we need around us personally and around us in order to deal with whatever comes our way in the future. It might seem a little bit negative or a little bit pessimistic, but it's a very effective form of emotional self-regulation. So I think very important. The next one, deal with adversity as it unfolds. So when we are faced with unexpected challenges, if you can, bring awareness to noticing what you are feeling and how you are responding in the moment. Not afterwards, but in the moment, really ask yourself, how am I feeling right now? What am I thinking? How am I responding? What are the feelings that I'm experiencing? And ideally, talk it through with somebody else as well, and really get the opportunity to, to talk about how you felt and how you have noticed that you've responded. That helps us to process, to acknowledge, to become aware of how we're feeling and how we're responding. And it also avoids the suppression of those feelings and emotions. And it means that we can make adjustments as well. If we're able to identify that we are responding in a certain way, then we can make adjustments to how we are responding. That's that self-awareness coming into play, isn't it? Having that awareness around how we're responding and then potentially adjusting our response. So just a couple more now. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. If the emphasis in our lives is to remain as comfortable as possible, as much of the time as possible, then we will probably avoid dealing with any unpleasant or difficult situations. I know people that have done that, and the problem with that is it doesn't protect us from future challenges or future adversity, but it does mean that we are not emotionally prepared for what may come our way in the future. If we face challenges head on as much as we can, then we flex those resilience muscles, and that means that we raise our tolerance to adversity and we become more resilient. Resilience is like a muscle, we build it, we develop it through the facing the challenges that we experience. So we become more resilient and then better equipped for the future. So just two more. Build a new strength. So we talked at the beginning about identifying the existing strengths that we have. And that's great. And why not also think about how we might be able to turn some of our perceived weaknesses into strengths too. So I'll give you an example, which is a personal lived experience of my own. So one of my biggest weaknesses, and I wouldn't say it's one of my biggest weaknesses now, but it was for a very long time, was that I was very sensitive to criticism and I didn't take it very well. And so I decided years ago now to ask for feedback as much as possible. So therefore opening myself up to potential criticism as much as possible. And that really helped me to develop as an individual and to learn how to receive criticism, how to receive constructive feedback. And it's been an incredible learning experience for me and a really powerful personal development journey. So, and I think that's become one of my strengths now. So, you know, you can think of something, identify something that you perceive as an area of weakness, and strive to change that and to make that into something that's more of a strength. So the last one, kind of obvious really, but resolving to be more resilient. We all have a choice, don't we? We have a choice to stay the same or a choice to grow and evolve. We have a choice to respond one way or another. And resolving to be more resilient is a choice. And all of those behaviours that we talked about, and all of those, the 10 key ways that I have been just talking through there, they're all things that will potentially contribute to growth in resilience for all of us. So that idea of resolving to be resilient, if there's just one thing, you know, that you take away, maybe it will be that. So I'm pretty much at the end of my presentation now. So just to reflect again on the session objectives. So I said that I was going to explain the relationship between resilience and mental health. I said that I would help you to identify some of the factors that undermine resilience building. I said that I would talk about some of the resilient behaviours that resilient people model or demonstrate, and then I said I would talk through the 10 key things that you can develop your resilience. So I hope it's been helpful. I hope there's been something of value in there for all of you. I'm really happy to take any questions if there are any, and I will after the session I will share the slides, and also we have a resource pack, so a resilience building resource pack, which builds on some of the things that I've talked about here, but adds in some additional resources that are useful for personal building resilience. So I'm really happy to let you have that as well. So we'll send that on, and that can be shared to anybody that would like it. So if there are any questions, like I say, I am very happy to take them now. And Stephen, shall I stop sharing the slides now as well?
Yeah, please. That'd be great. Is there anybody who wants to ask any questions? All I can say, Claire, it's again a big thank you to you for doing this presentation. It's one of the best presentations I've heard, and it's probably come at the right time after the pandemic, and I think there's too much negativity in the world, and obviously I've taken away a lot of good takeaways from that. I think the big one for me is be positive and not always be negative. There's too many people that are negative, and I know quite a few people, but can we all have a big thank you on that? Thanks, Claire.
Very, very welcome. No problem at all. Thank you.
Is there any other questions anybody wants to ask? I think you've answered quite a few of them on that. But yeah, if you could share that, Claire. I know I'm in a big establishment, and I know I could probably use your skills. We're looking at stress in our industry at the moment. And I think you've come away with not just telling us what is mental health, but how we can resolve it. And I think the important thing is do it slowly.
Absolutely.
On that. But again, thank you for that.
Very welcome. And there's a couple of nice comments in the chat, so thank you. Thank you for your feedback. Really nice. Thank you.
Great. Okay, nothing else from anybody?
No, super session, Claire. Thank you so much. And yeah, no questions in chat.
Problem. All right. Well, I will say my goodbyes to all of you and thank you so much. And I'll follow up. As I said, there's the slides, but also there's a really nice resource pack, and I'm really happy to let you all have that as well. So thank you very much, and hope to see you all again.
Thank you for that, Claire. Excellent.
Absolute pleasure.
Super.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See you again. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Hello.
Are you okay, Roger?
Yeah. Sorry, I was late joining.
Are
I've
we
literally got
We're still recording.
right.
Okay.
Can we
Don't want
stop
to.
the recording?
Now that was a very good presentation, and sharing her experiences.
Agree.
Sharing her personal experiences. It was good. It got to the heart as well. But no, it's good. How you keep